Moving on now, and smart devices are always one of the more popular presents around this time of the year. Christmas isn't just a busy period for retailers, it's peak period for criminals to take advantage of security gaps in connected services. To discuss this, I'm now joined by Matt Tett from the Internet of Things Alliance Australia. Matt, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Firstly, what sort of smart devices could be at risk to consumers?
Well, I think really consumers need to look at all smart devices. They need to ensure that their privacy isn't potentially being compromised, as we've seen in the news and media recently. So pretty much anything a consumer is likely to plug into the internet could potentially have security flaws with it that compromise their safety and privacy.
Are we talking about mobile phones, iPads? What specific smart devices?
So there's a lot of proliferation. So traditionally in IT, we've had things like smartphones, which have come out over the last decade or so, tablets, laptops, but now we're seeing devices like home cameras, smart toys, which are now requiring access to Wi-Fi and internet networks, smart speakers, a whole plethora of devices, televisions even now that are connected to the internet, which all have potentially cameras and microphones, which watch and listen for features and benefits, but also potentially introduce risks if not secured correctly.
And Matt, what is the current global agreement in terms of securing or regulating these smart devices?
Well, it depends on the jurisdiction or the country. A lot of countries such as UK, Canada, US, Australia and New Zealand forming some consensus around that, but at the end of the day it's up to the industry as well as people that are procuring the devices to really look at the security features that are there for their benefit.
And what are some of the risks?
Well, probably the main risks are compromised passwords. So if people set really simple passwords or even leave default passwords, then those are generally propagated throughout the internet, and it's quite easy for someone who has malicious intent to actually connect to those devices remotely and potentially access the information that the premises is transmitting. So I think one of the key things is passwords, which people need to look at, but also read the fine print, because even though you've bought that product for the features and the functionality, it may not necessarily mean that the information isn't also being sold to third parties that you may not actually agree with.
It's that time of the year, gift giving. A lot of these sorts of devices are being given and as well as bought. Is there any way that consumers can protect themselves?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of simple things that people can do which don't cost anything at all. As I mentioned, change passwords straight away. As soon as you buy a device that wants to connect to the internet, before you even actually connect it, it's good to set it up and change the password. It takes a couple of minutes. It's very simple. Obviously use different passwords for different devices, just in case one password gets compromised. It means they don't have access to everything in the home. Second thing to do is to read those terms and conditions. They are quite long, they are quite hard, but at the end of the day it is good to know whether the manufacturer is using your information for the correct purposes and not necessarily reselling it to others or using it where it might compromise the privacy. So very simple, straightforward things that people can actually do to make themselves slightly more secure.
Matt, you mentioned that many of these devices have inbuilt microphones, cameras, speakers of sorts. Should we be concerned at all? Is there an element of concern there?
I think people need to be cautious. I mean, the whole idea is not to panic. Part of the IoT Alliance Australia's remit is to encourage the adoption of internet-connected things, and our remit within our workstream in that organisation is to ensure that they are secure, and security underpins safety and privacy. So I think people being aware of where they're actually deploying the devices as well within their premises, things like children's toys that are connected, it's probably best not to leave them in the bedroom with them. It's probably best to have them in an open public place so people can hear what's actually going on. There's been reported cases of those kinds of devices being compromised and people accessing the speakers through the devices. But again, through weak passwords more than weak security in the devices themselves. It's also good for the manufacturers to step up and increase some of those security and sell them as features. This is what our device can do. And at the end of the day, if something isn't used continually, then it might be best just to unplug it for the time being until it is actually needed.
Some timely advice there, Matt Tett. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.